tools and resources they need to to keep doing and to get away that overwhelm. But we also have programs and resources for kids so that moms have one less thing on their plate that they have to do in raising self-sufficient kids who are responsible and kind and show appreciation for others. So
Yeah.
that's me.
I love it. And like for me, like delegating and automating so much in our life was so huge. There were so many
Hmm.
things, like you said, that we just take on as these burdens of like, I should be doing it. And it was funny as I actually posted a picture of my kids helping out with dishes and stuff. And I was so surprised at the backlash that I
Really?
received on Instagram of how it was like child slavery. Um, yes,
No.
no joke. I
That
had like
is
all of these, and they were like what was it called? Like accounts that were really, that was what they geared towards, was like telling people about like child slavery in the home, that kids shouldn't be doing chores. Like they really targeted, I think, people that were posting about it. So in that sense, I was like, okay, I'm just going to let this go. But I was very surprised at the backlash of people that said that. And even friends of mine who are a little bit older, that is the same mentality that they have. It was my job as a mom to take care of everything so that my kids could just get a good education. And I was so surprised. So I'm really glad.
that's really surprising to me too. And the fact that, like you said that, I want to go look up this post and find out who these accounts are because like there is so much good having kids do chores, but yeah, that is a common thing you hear that like your kid's job is to get an education and you should like make it as easy as possible for them to get that education. But it's like it's totally false because what we're teaching our kids is that when they grow up, like, how are they going to use that education now?
Yeah.
Like, they are still going to have home responsibilities and life responsibilities that they have to take care of. And so, what we can do as parents is teach them how to manage everything, to make sure that you're participating at home as
Yeah.
well as participating in the workplace and to work together as a family so that you can all come together and tackle the work and
Yeah.
like slay the work together and not have it all fall on one person.
Yep, yep, and that's what one in our household, I'm always like, "We're a team. We're doing this together. We're a team. We're not."
Yeah.
It's not one person in the house that's all on their own. So, I'm excited to dive into this because I know this is a conversation that so many moms want to have. They want to have their kids maybe helping out in the house and doing things, but it feels like the only way to do it would be to nag at them. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about like how do we have that conversation with our kids? Like how do we get them on board with being excited about being a part of that team, like wanting to do it and not feeling like it's this mom is just now telling me I can't do all of these fun things in doing it in a much different way.
So, one of the big things about getting kids on board to do chores is that you have to give them the element of choice, and making them have their say in what they do, but also like giving them the instruction on how they do it. So,
Yeah.
like, I came to a breaking point in my house, probably it was 3 years ago at Christmas time, like, it was December, and I had just spent all that month, like, doing all the presents for my family, attending all of, like, the holiday functions, this is
Mhm.
pre-COVID when
Mhm.
we had holiday functions, but, and, like, managing my own business
Yeah.
while my husband had a really, really busy time at work, and so he couldn't participate in that. And Christmas Day, I broke down and I was crying, like, I was sobbing. I'm like, "I cannot have this be my life. Like,
Yeah.
we need to change things around here." And so one of the first things we did is we had a family meeting. And
Mhm.
my kids they're now 8 and 12. But all it was is we just sat together and we had a piece of paper, like nothing fancy, and we brainstormed together, like, what are the jobs that we have in this house that need to get done? And at that point, it wasn't about like assigning jobs. It was just
Mhm.
saying, like, okay, what is the work that needs to be done?
Yeah.
And I would some things, my husband listed some, and then my daughter and my son joined in. And then once we thought we had everything, we're like, okay, like, what do you guys want to take? And we just went around each taking the chores that we wanted. And
Yeah.
then at the end, it was a negotiation process. It was like my son would turn to my daughter and be like, okay, well, I will do the cat litter if you do this one right here. So they had choice in the matter of the chores.
Yeah.
And they were brought in the discussion, and it wasn't something that was like implemented on them. It was a
Mhm.
process that they were a part of. And that is like, it's gold when that
Yes.
happens.
Yes. Well, and I think that layer of like tidbit of information goes to so many layers of parenting, right? Like that element of choice can change, I mean, almost anything, not just the
Yeah.
chores, right? Like it changes how fast people are getting out of the house, whether there's a meltdown at breakfast, whether there's like all of those types of things, like
Mhm.
shift and change when that element of choice is brought in.
Yeah, well, like there's a theory, it's called self-motivation theory, and it comes from like three things. Like to be self-motivated, you have to have autonomy, which is like the feeling of control over your own
Mhm.
life. You have to have competence, which isn't like knowing how to do something, but it's really knowing that you could find out how to do something, you could figure
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
And then you have to have relatedness. You have to have a really great relationship with the person who's teaching you. And if you have those three things going on, you're going to be self motivated and your kids are
Yeah.
going to be self motivated. But when it comes to chores, like autonomy is taken away usually from kids. They're usually told exactly what to do. The relatedness is an issue because it's like one parent like nagging and reminding them. And
Mhm.
then sometimes competence is an issue. Like they may not even know how to do the chore or how to
Yeah.
figure it out because they were just assigned it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a huge piece too, because I know for a long time I was helping people with decluttering and things like that. And there's this element of like sending your kids into the room and just saying, clean up your room and
Yeah.
expecting that they're going to be able to do it. And one, all of the stuff is overwhelming and exhausting and they don't know what to do with it.
It
But
overwhelms me when I see a
I
dirty room.
know.
Yeah.
So there's that layer, but then there's two, like that you even brought up, like developmentally, each of them are at different stages of like what they're able to handle and what they're able to do. And so, how do you factor that in when you're looking at this choice? Because even, like my 5-year-old can probably clean out the litter box, but there's going to be cat litter everywhere. It's not going to stay inside the litter box. And so then it adds that other layer of now chores are maybe in the long run they're going to be helpful to me, but right now in the teaching moment it seems like extra work, right?
Yeah, and the teaching moment is some extra work, but the way to approach it, like we can't expect kids to like automatically do a job by
Mhm.
themselves at first. I usually follow an I do, we do, you do teaching model. So like I do, they watch me do the chore, they watch my husband do the chore. We do is the longest stage. That's where like
Mhm.
I'm either doing the chore with them or my husband's doing the chore with them. And we're just like we're there for support. We're there for guidance. We're there if they like, especially when it comes to cat litter, when my son has to do cat litter, like he freaks out if he like can't get something up. So that's what we're there for. And then as soon as this child like shows confidence and they show like, oh, I got this, and they're doing it mostly on their own, that's finally when you could step back and you can release that chore from you and give it completely to the child because
Yeah.
they feel confident in what they're doing. You know that it's going to be done correctly. That's the wonderful part. But we do that stage, it lasts longer than many
Yeah.
parents think.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how do you keep up with that consistency? Because I think that's another big question that
Mhm.
I have seen lots of people, like my clients will talk about too, is that they start with these new ideas. Everybody's excited, everybody's on board. Then a few weeks later, that what is it, the fire that was there kind of
Yeah.
fizzles out and it's no longer fun anymore. Like
Yeah.
for us, we implemented like a morning routine, so they all had their morning routines at the end of the week. Depending on how many they had on there, they got money and they were all excited about the money. And then 2 months, 3 months in, it's like it's no longer fun and exciting. And so how do you keep that element going? Maybe if it's not using a system like that, if there's another way to keep that internal motivation going, or how do you do that without like the choice is there when they are excited in the initial, but then that
Yeah.
consistency piece.
Yeah, so that's a really good question because consistency and follow through, like I call them dirty words because so many people beat themselves up about it. Like I'm sure you hear it too, like, oh, I just wish I could be more consistent or I wish I could follow through. And
Yeah.
That's usually not the issue. The issue is that there are just way too many things that we're keeping in our head at one time that we
Mm,
have to be consistent and follow through on.
yeah.
And when it comes to chores, after that initial like chore distribution, um, like a few weeks, like you start noticing they're cutting back, they're not doing it. That's when you could use a method. And this was originated with Vicky Hofel and her book, Duct Tape Parenting. It's like putting on the metaphorical duct tape over your mouth, like duct taping yourself to the chair and watching them. Like we watched for a day. Vicky recommends for a week. I couldn't do it for a week. I'm sorry. But it's when you watch them and you see, okay, what are the things that they do without being nagged and reminded about? And then what are
Mhm.
the things that they do that they need reminding on?
Mhm.
And you watch that. So we watched that with my kids, and what we found is like with my daughter, she does her own laundry, she picks up her room. Those are things that she did without being reminded, but she was not picking up her dishes from the kitchen table. Like
Yeah.
that one day at breakfast, like that breakfast plate with syrup on it stayed on the table all day, like all day. Like, and my husband and I were like looking at each other. We're like, but we can't say anything. We said, like, um, but that was such great information for us because we found a skill that she wasn't aware that she needed to build, and we weren't aware she needed to build. So
Mhm.
then you'll have these 2 lists, the list that, like, they do without reminding and the list that they need to get reminded about. And you show them this list and you ask them to pick one skill, like just one. That's how we get over the consistency and the follow through. Just pick one that you are going to focus on doing without being reminded about.
Mhm.
And they pick one, and then they're focused on that, and you're focused on that. It's written somewhere, so you don't really have to nag and remind. You can kind of just stand there and kind of look at, like, I look at the refrigerator. I'm like, that's like, and like she picks up on it pretty quickly. Um,
Yeah.
but it's giving her then the autonomy back. It's giving her like the control over doing this task without the nagging and
Yeah.
the reminding. And you just go through it step by step, and you'll see over time that kids will take on those chores once that they are given sole responsibility for completing them. And they know you're watching them too on that one chore, and it
Yeah.
becomes a habit. And then once it's a habit, you don't have to nag and remind anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I think like what you kind of talked about, it's just like so powerful for both kids and adults too, right? Like that element of that we take on so many new things at the same time. And you talked about
Yeah.
like the follow through, and it's not really the lack of being able to follow through. It's the lack or the lack of being able to isolate it down to just one thing to follow through,
Mm.
and that constant juggle and shuffle of a million different things. And so it is the same thing with our kids. Like even me right now, like I know for a fact my daughter's lunch is still on the kitchen table from
Yeah.
today. And but it's like the shoes and then the backpack and the homework and all the different things that trying to juggle and like pick up every single one of those habits all at the same time is overwhelming. And I love how
Mhm.
you brought that up, that like to focus in on one of those habits and one of those at a time rather than the entire chore system all at one time.
Yeah, because when we look at the entire chore system all at one time, it's like walking into that messy room. Like, where do
Mhm.
you even start? What do? You need like your focal point. And
Yeah.
so just having them pick one gives them back their choice and also gives you that focal point that you can help them build skills in that one area. Because you
Ye
may also notice that when you focus on that chore, that it's not just being reminded on to do that chore. There might be another problem going on with that chore where they feel unconfident in doing it, or
Uh-huh.
they just don't know what cues to look for that it's their time to do that chore.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that idea. And I think that too, you're building on those layers of confidence, right? Like every time they master that skill and they do it well and they keep going, they build that confidence instead of the constant nagging, which I think
Mhm.
oftentimes does the opposite, right? Like it leaves them, like even this morning, my daughter we got in a little bit of a tiff because I have calls all day today. And she came out within the first 10 minutes of my call and was like hovering over my desk. And so after, she was like, I just can't do anything well. And I was like, well, no, that's not the case. Like, but I think it's easy when we're nagging or we're picking out those small things that aren't going well, they sort of blow up, right? They start to see that that's how everything is. But this is the opposite, like focusing in on those one things and building that confidence, I think is really, really powerful.
Yeah, building the confidence and then making sure to notice the things that they are doing well.
Yeah.
Like this is from Michelle Borba, who wrote the book Thrivers. She says, pick out that thing your child's doing well and then connect it to a character trait. So
Mm,
like if you see, for instance, like your daughter, like put away all of her homework in her backpack and got her
yeah.
backpack ready for school, be like, I noticed you got your backpack ready for school. That's really responsible. And
Yeah.
so you're connecting things with the character traits that you want them to see themselves as.
For sure. My kids go to a school that uses the 7 habits of highly effective people. So
Oh, wow.
we're always relating it back to that. We're like, oh, that was really proactive, or oh, you were thinking of the end in mind. Like we're always, but I like it always, that's always the running theme in the back of my head. But I love the identity because it's helping shape their identity too. And that identity is such a key foundation of who they become as adults down the road.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. JoAnn, this was awesome. And I loved having you on. Is there anything that you feel like we've missed or left out in this conversation about how we get our kids on board with doing chores around the house?
I would say like just parents and moms in particular, we put so much on ourselves and
Yeah.
we beat ourselves up so much. And if like we could do one thing and show our kids that instead of being really self-critical about ourselves, that we can show ourselves some compassion and kindness,
Yeah.
and then that really filters onto our kids too. So even if like we make mistakes, if they're doing chores and they make mistakes, or like your daughter said, and my kids, I hear them say the same thing, I can't do anything right.
Yeah.
It's just looking back at us and making sure that we're acknowledging our wins and
Hmm.
being really self-compassionate about our failures as well. But
Yeah.
parenting's hard.
it's
I mean,
it's definitely messy and there's definitely lots of mistakes. And I think that that's the beauty of it though, right? Like the beauty of figuring out what how we grow and how we learn and how we adapt to all of those. And I think that that is those are the powerful lessons that we're teaching our kids, right? Like it's
yeah.
okay to fail. It's okay to mess up. We're all going to mess up big time.
Yeah.
And it's how do we recover from that? And how do we move forward? And how do we approach hard things and big problems? And how do we move them, you know?
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
all of our mess ups, like, I mean, probably you feel the same way that your failures are your biggest learning experiences. Like you
Yes.
don't learn as much from success as you do from failure.
Yep. 100%. Although the success always feels better. But
It always feels better. Always feels better. Looking back after you've like gotten over that initial burn.
yes.
Then it's like our failures are our biggest learning. And that's how we became the people we are.
So much truth. So,
Yeah.
okay, if people want to follow up with you and get in touch with you, I know you have some new exciting things coming out. Do you want to share a little bit about those?
Sure. So I have a book coming out for kids. It's my first book for kids. It comes out July 6th. It's right back there on the shelf if you're watching on Facebook Live, Me and My Friendships. And it's for kids ages 6 to 9, teaching them how to make friends and how to be better friends.
Very
So
cool.
definitely go pre-order that. It's on pre-order on Amazon right now. And if you're listening to this later, it's on Amazon.
Yep. And then how can they find you on social
They could
media or your website or wherever?
They could find me at noguiltmom.com, or I'm very active on Instagram at noguiltmom.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. I know that this will be so helpful for so many moms who want to lighten their load a little bit and also at the same time empower their kids to grow up to be really competent, independent, thriving adults too. Like it's a win-win in all different ways when we help collaborate and work together as a team and just, yeah. So thank you so much for coming on to share.
Well, thank you so much for having me and
Yeah.
inviting me. This has been fun.
Yeah.